Hi, good morning. I'm Chris Davis. I'm the Fisheries Assessment Supervisor for Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources for Lake Huron. We're out of the Owen Sound office. You can see I'm dealing with a right pectoral fin clip right now. I'm we would call it a clip two in Ontario. And one thing you can tell is just from looking at me, I'm definitely not wild. So I was told by Tim to start off with a joke and keep it pithy. So yeah. Okay, so I'm here to. This is kind of for the Monty Python fans in the crowd. This is kind of now for something completely different. It's a pretty data heavy talks that we've been through this morning. I'm the saltine cracker. I'm just to let people's brains relax a little bit. This is primarily a procedural type presentation, just to talk a bit about the good work that the Lake Trout Working Group has been up to. So this is for those that don't know. So the Lake Huron Technical Committee is made up of there's agencies that are management agencies for the lake that do have representatives on the committee. There's also quite a number of people that we draw on that are experts in fisheries and other issues around Lake Huron. We form the technical committee, and a subcommittee of that is a Lake Trout Working Group, and these are the Lake Trout geeks, that the people that really know their stuff about lake trout. And if you know your stuff about lake trout and Lake Huron, you're probably actually a global expert. So a bit of a shout out to my peeps in the Lake Trout Working Group. I'm going to go through, so the title of the talk here is about this is a presentation that I gave remotely last year. It's the milestones on lake trout rehabilitation. I'm going to talk a little bit about potential future considerations. This was kind of an invited talk almost from the Lake Committee. I want to provide some updates on work that we've done in response to some of the questions from the Lake Committee on that. And I'm just going to kind of go through, I guess, the things that are on our, the things that we're working on as that group. So this is just a more or less priority ranked group of tasks that the Lake Trout Working Group is working on. I'm going to go through an update on the state of the lake dashboard. We got some comments on that. I don't know how many folks are familiar with the dashboard, but it's the kind of the go-to for state of the lake reporting now that the commission has set up. I'm going to talk about a paper on evaluation of progress towards rehabilitation milestones that we're working on. Talk a little bit about the action items that came from a genetics strains report. This was a task set out by the Lake Committee a few years ago that has been finalized in the last year. It was reported on at the Lake meetings last year as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that arose from that. Review assessment methods on lake trout. Talk about some of the things that we can work on towards publications, and then there's some other things that we're working on that are kind of out in front of our group here. This is a photo of me with a beautiful Parry Sound lake trout, although it's got a bit of a lump on its head there, but it's a nice fish. Back when I could still use both my arms. So, the state of the lake dashboard. So this is just a graphic on the right-hand side. I think most folks should be familiar with it. It's just a place people can go to get a bit of an update, a synopsis on what's going on related to the fish community objectives for Lake Huron. So we've revised our task. This fell from the presentation that was given last year. We went through the milestones from the 1998 rehabilitation plan. So this is a plan that the Lake Huron Technical Committee had produced, published back in 1998, which had kind of laid out what was the expectations for progress towards lake trout rehabilitation. We reported on that, the progress we've seen since rehabilitation work had started. Reported on that last year. We got some feedback from the Lake Committee members and others. So things that we've done to work on that, we added some emphasis on the stocking timelines as a frame of reference for the plan. In addition to that, to the yield objectives that were already reported on, we talked about how we're progressing towards mean age, spawner abundance, and wild juvenile abundance. This has just been submitted to the Lake Trout Working Group for review just this past weekend, actually. We're expecting to have that completed by May 1st, and we'll then publish that to the site. I think that the Lake Huron is, I think, the last lake to be reporting on the state of lake reporting, and certainly we're under the gun to try and get that done. So that's a task in front of us right now. Related to that is a white paper or report on milestones as per the 1998 plan. So these are just some of the graphics here that we went through last year that report on those milestones. So this report's in draft. It's going to be circulated to the Lake Trout Working Group for comment and feedback. So the focus on this is on those milestones again. We're going to provide more detail and nuance because we'll be able to go a little bit more detail than we can in the state of the lake reporting. It'll be a little bit more emphasis on the spatial and temporal variation among basins and talk a little bit more about that kind of thing. Well, also, the plan is to make recommendations for alignment of assessments. I say alignment of assessments. The standardization's a difficult word to get to when we're talking about data sets that are decades old and people don't want to really change their methods a whole lot, and I'm one of those people. But just there's ways that we can probably refine the analysis of that and come up with more common alignment of those assessments. So we'll be working towards that. We're going to make recommendations on adjustments of the targets, I think. One of the things that we've gone through in this process is some of the targets that were set out in terms of things like CPUE of juveniles, as a, for instance, may be higher than we need for rehabilitation. So when we get to those kinds of details, we'll talk about maybe adjusting those thresholds or targets that we're aiming for. One of the reasons we're not meeting the objectives is just because our density measures for juveniles, say, is lower than what was set out in 1998. That may be unrealistic, so there will be some expert opinion on trying to set those objectives or targets. Yeah, and then one of the things that we want to get into will be some of this other things that we should be talking about. They were mentioned in the 98 plan. They're not specifically things that are reported on yet, but things like mortality rate, lamprey marks, prey fish, and thiaminase. They're not things that we have set out as specific trend plots or those kinds of things, but I would hope to get to that in that report. And of course, there's potential to publish this in primary literature once we get it done. There was a great synopsis for Lake Superior that was done, just kind of declaring basically the lake trout rehabilitation was complete, and we'd like to try and work on something towards something like that for Lake Huron, at least stay where we're at currently. So this is just kind of a refresher for those. This is some of the details that'll go into the state of lake reporting in the white paper. So I presented this table here last year, and it's just a kind of a stoplight analogy. Is things that are green mean your go, amber is there's some things going on, and red is just have not hit the targets. So these are the milestones on the left hand side here, and those are the 1A, B, and C relate to just the preliminary objectives. Stage 2 is the secondary phase objectives, and they're just those things that I talked about. So looking at mean age of adults, CPUE of spawning fish, and then CPUE of juveniles. And this is kind of the progression. I won't get into the details of that. So we're taking that and kind of moved it into the state of the lake reporting format, which is so the ones that are the gray are these different sections. So as I said, we're going to talk about the lake trout stocking, and then we're going through mean age, and we've summarized it by main basin, North Channel, and Georgia Bay. We just basically broke Lake Huron down into the main basins that are 3 basins that are sort of form the lake. Anyway, so that'll be part of the process there. So we went from the review of milestones last year, and then through this year, we're working on the state of the lake and the report. So in addition to that, there was this recommendations. There's a genetic strains report that was submitted to the Lake Committee. There's some recommendations in that. So our group is going to go through those recommendations, just make sure that that stuff's clear. A lot of these things have been implemented already. So these are 3 of the recommendations that came from the strains report. There's future coded wire tagging projects should include a recovery component. We'll talk a bit about whether there's things that we can do that would build into more of the coded wire tagging work. There's things that we can do to try and refine how those metrics came out. One of the problems with coded wire tagging returns is there's a real bias towards where the fish are sampled, which isn't necessarily where they're stocked. So there's probably more work that can be done there to try and tease that out. It recommended Seneca, Parison, Lake Manitou strains, like that they're supporting the majority of the natural reproduction currently. So just basically emphasizing that those strains would continue to be ones that are stocked where they'd be stocking, and recommended also Superior and Lewis Lake strains underrepresented and therefore recommended discontinuing. That report's actually available. I've got the link is here in the talk, but that's available. The genetic strains report is on the GLFC site there now. So some action items that came from that genetic strains report too. One is the ongoing collections for continued genetic analysis. So Wendy Stock is part of our group, and a geneticist is going to be part of that effort. She was part of the strains report as well. So we'll be looking at, I've got a lot of genetic material from samples and assessments done through my group, and many of the other agencies do as well. So we'll be looking at continued analysis of strains that are reporting or that are presenting in the population. There's some research into strain distinctive characteristics. So we saw Aaron Dunlap gave a presentation on this, the life history stuff. There's also been proposals for looking at things like depth distribution or movements of the different strains. We can incorporate that. Part of the project that Aaron talked about, we've got lake trout that have been tagged with telemetry tags. We have genetic material from them. We can look at strains. We didn't specifically, you can't tell from looking at a fish what strain it is, but we can look at those kinds of things and try and tease that stuff out after the movement, after the fact. So that's the general movement work that can be done. And of course, there's potential to produce a manuscript from that genetic strains report as well. It would benefit from a little bit more detailed analysis. Like I said, this is this one graphic here. This is the analysis that was done for coded wire tags. And the one thing that they weren't really able to get at in the detail for the Lake Committee charge was just trying to tease out those things related to, well, if you are doing most of your collections in the same place you're stocking the fish, you're more likely to get those strains collected, kind of thing. So there was some more work that can be done there to try and make more of that genetics work ongoing. So then the future considerations, things that we're working on, this is calibration of existing surveys. There's a number of surveys done in the same locations across seasons. We didn't do anything in our first analysis to try and sort of tease that out. So a catch rate of juvenile fish in a spring survey versus a summer survey, we can try and tease those kinds of things out and see if there's ways that we can calibrate those so that when we're doing, instead of having people change their survey types, if we can take existing surveys and then map those one across another, that would definitely be some efficiency there. Just looking at gear and survey design alignment, we've got some multi-mesh nets and some monofilament gear, and being able to calibrate that information would be useful. And then there's just even things just like depth distributions of the different sets and picking out, say, things like core depth, and those things change across seasons, all that kind of thing. And then we're looking at, quantifying other variables or setting targets related to the FCOs and continue work in that area. Always rumors that maybe the FCOs will be up for discussion, and we're certainly keen on participating in that when it comes to lake trout. And then there's a number of recommendations for the Lake Huron Committee that came out of the review of our previous state of lake reporting. So working on those kinds of things. And this is just so I talk about these are the different assessment programs. This was a table that was in my presentation last year as well. And this is just basically all the different assessment programs and continuing to work to try and align these, like I said, where possible. So you can just a couple of patterns I'll show here. So the CPU of spawning fish. So we've got spawning reefs, throughout the lake. But certainly not all of the geography of Lake Huron's covered, and trying to map that out a little bit better and relate that to finer scale where fish were stocked and understand those kinds of things. So I think we can still learn a lot by mining the existing information. And then, like I said, the CPU of juveniles is another one. So we've got summer gill nets and spring gill nets kind of across the different areas and places that we've got these things. We may be able to use them to calibrate those survey types to try and generate like a more universal measure for things like CPUE and that kind of thing. Same thing with mean age. If you take a mean age from a summer gillnet fishery or commercial fishery, how does that compare to, say, a spawning reef or a spring gillnet survey? So some ways that we can try and improve efficiency there. And they may be one-off studies we can do say during like a CSMI year or something like that, and then we can start to calibrate those. So just acknowledge the different agencies and part of the team. So the data that we've been working with are provided by my ministry, Internal Ministry of Natural Resources, Michigan DNR, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and USGS, as well as Sioux Tribe. And then this is the working group, members across not just those agencies, but other agencies that are, and they're contributing their time. Oops. And efforts. So much appreciated there. And thanks to all the crews over the years that have helped us with the collections.